Hello, everyone. Welcome to an Advanced Sports Analytics live stream. Today is Wednesday, May 19th. Got a big 24 hours or so of SuperDraft contests coming up. The two play-in games capped tonight for the NBA, the much-anticipated Warriors-Lakers game, as well as Memphis-San Antonio. A little less intrigue, but a slate nonetheless. Got MLB going tonight, Tuesday, full slate. And then, of course, major PGA Championship teeing off tomorrow. So we're going to attempt to go through all three to get you guys kind of primed for the next 24 hours of DFS action. Should be a good one. I'm going to try to also do some screen sharing so that you can get a sense of kind of some of the stuff that we are looking at with regards to projections, using optimizers, etc. So hopefully everyone can see, yes, the ASA home tab. We're going to get started with PGA. I know it doesn't kick off until tomorrow, but I think just a good place to start. Should be it is a big tournament, should be some good action. I know there are the usual kind of offering of SuperDraft contests. So when you load into the or tab into the optimizer in this PGA pin shot projection dropdown, you select SuperDraft, or if you're playing on another site. We have the course info tab, which usually has information about the course, like baseline scoring, relative impact of putting, around the green play, approach play, off the tee play, course history, etc. That being said, we're at Kiowa Island this weekend, which hasn't hosted an event in quite some time, I think since early 2000s. So we don't have any prior data on this. We're using data dating back over the last 6 years. So there's no kind of baseline or relative impact. Have read that the course is extremely difficult. I believe a slope rating of 155. So should play hard. There are some big names in the field. Expect those names to kind of rise to the top. So with that in mind, I think we've touched on it a bit in these streams before. The SuperDraft scoring isn't super rewarding of finish position. There's more kind of relative value in scoring points, but in tournaments like this where there is expected low scoring, we do see upweight, I guess, in the value of finish position. So really trying to nail guys who are finishing in the top 5 to 10 slots, I think is going to be super important. We always want players that are getting through to the weekend. But that being said, making it through to the weekend doesn't guarantee just droves of extra fantasy points. Like we saw last weekend, where if you didn't have 6 guys that made it through, you were pretty much dead. There were so many scoring fantasy points being added over the weekend. On a weekend, apologize for the dog. On a weekend. On a weekend like this with the tough course, getting 5 guys through, I don't think is a must. But obviously, look, we're shooting to get as many guys through as possible. But the risk of going 506 or something like that, don't think can totally sink your ship if you can get 5 guys through and they're all finishing within the top 6 or 7 golfers. And there are golfers that make it through to the weekend but kind of fizzle and maybe shoot over par over the weekend and actually lose fantasy points over the weekend. Something to consider. So we'll dive right into the projections. As for anyone who's played SuperDraft before, you understand that there are raw fantasy points that we project. So naturally, the best players are going to have the highest raw projection. And then we have a multiplier. It's called salary, but this is how much the players' raw points are multiplied by. And the goal is to optimize towards most fantasy points when multiplied by the multiplier. And that's what this value column is going to allow you to do, sort on players who have the highest projection post multiplier. So we're seeing now just like some guys here at the top, especially, these guys, Yang, Rosner, Caitlin. These are guys who we don't have any prior data on, so I'd be a little hesitant to, trust them. There's, I think like in general, it's kind of difficult to model out guys that don't have any data. We have to make some assumptions about kind of their overall play. Over the course of the day, we'll kind of fine tune some of these missing data players. But some guys that are bubbling to the top, Thomas Peters been playing a lot on the Euro Tour and hasn't played that much on the PGA Tour. He was in play last weekend, did make it through to the weekend. Looks like didn't putt super well, lost strokes putting, but gaining strokes in all three other categories of play. Peters was quite popular last weekend and made it through to the weekend, but fizzled. Expect him to be fairly popular again this weekend and at 1.5x. I think Peters has some good juice where if he can make it through to the weekend and contend for like a top 15, top 20 spot, he could be a valuable part of lineups. Zalatoris contended at the Masters, obviously, appears to have kind of that major medal at 1.25x. I think that is a good multiplier on Zalatoris. He looks like he has been great approach and been kind of average to slightly above average in some of these other categories around the green off the tee, losing a few strokes, or rather fraction of a stroke per round putting. But I think overall, like a good balanced golfer, 1.25, a good multiplier for a guy who I think has legit win equity. I don't think there are going to be too many guys with good win odds at this multiplier. At this kind of 1.25 and up, 1.2 and up kind of price point. Tringali has been really steady over the past calendar year, gaining strokes in the last 6 months in every facet of his game. 1.45, I think a really good multiplier. He hasn't like shown, like Zalatoris or, I'm sure we'll get to like Sam Burns down here at some point. Like these are kind of longer plays who have shown the ability to close out tournaments. Tringali has been in it like most weekends, made it through to the weekend. Seems like just about every weekend that I can remember. I think we might have a miscut or two in there as of late, but he hasn't really like shown kind of great closing ability. I think in a tough field, it's going to be tough for a guy like Tringali to, have much win equity. But I think at 1.45, you have a guy who you feel has pretty good odds to make it through the weekend and, hopefully challenge for like a top 20, top 15 finish position, which, I think a guy with a multiplier like Tringali, 1.45, you don't need to have six golfers all in the top 10. If you can get a 1.45, 1.4 multiplier, 1.35 multiplier even in the top 15 or 1.5 guy in the top 20, that roster slot is going to add value and kind of give you the opportunity to win tournaments. What won't, or probably won't give you the opportunity to win tournaments is like pegging Jon Rahm at 1.05 and having him finish in like 15th place or something like that. And especially given the course where I think there's going to be not a ton of positive scoring, positive scores. 1.05 multiplier on Rahm and kind of 15th place is just not going to hold too much value. So something to keep in mind there. As we move down, Rory, of course, won back in the winner's circle recently. He's at 1.15, and I think last I saw is the odds-on favorite to win the tournament. So, feel pretty good, about Rory at 1.15. If we sort by salary, he is not even really in the top tier of golfers. There are, I don't know, what is that? It's probably like 10 or so golfers with lower multipliers than he. There, like I said, last time I checked, there are no golfers with better win odds than Rory. So, I think just by comparing multiplier to Vegas odds, like Rory looks like a great play. Patty Harrington, super high multiplier. I tend to be a little hesitant with these kind of max multiplier guys. really favoring guys in like the 1-4 range, Tringali, Kirk, Hoffman. I think they give you kind of the same heavy multiplier where good performances by them can be super valuable, but I think there's a pretty significant risk drop off when you move from like the max multiplier of like 1.6, 1.65 down to 1.4, 1.45, 1.35, something like that. So like Kirk, I think makes a lot of sense. He's been very balanced as of late. Hoffman makes a lot of sense, been very balanced as of late. Both Kirk, really all three of these guys, Tringali, Kirk, Hoffman, over the past 6 months have been gaining strokes. And granted, they have been playing weaker fields. Like we haven't seen a ton of really deep fields in the past, or really in this calendar year. But feel good about guys who are robust golfers, able to gain strokes in really any number of ways, and especially at a course where we don't have any course history or any recent court. We don't have recent course history on how players have fared at this course, and we also don't have good data to go off of to try to pinpoint like what are highly valuable golfer traits and which traits can be downweighted. So when that's the case, I think erring on the side of caution and trying to go for balanced golfers who just have a low likelihood of hurting you in a massive way or having severe weaknesses of theirs exposed by a course. I think is a sound approach. So all three of those guys, Hoffman, Kirk, Tringali, kind of fit this mold of nice multiplier, have been playing well, and have strong kind of well-rounded game. Rahm, of course, going to be he is, I believe, the or not quite the low multiplier. Thomas Johnson, DeChambeau at flat 1. So I think kind of that extra 0.05 for Rahm gives him some added value. Hard to separate kind of between those top 4 guys. All of them, we know are 4, if not the 4 best golfers in the world. When we kind of look at the medium form of like the last year or so, but Rahm hasn't been playing the greatest golf of late, but of course it just takes one to turn it around. Werenski, a guy who finds his way into a number of weekends from time to time. 155, got a good multiplier on him. Not super confident in kind of his top 10 or win equity. Would be more partial to some of those 1.4, 1.45 guys mentioned above. Palmer been super consistent and kind of stayed at this 1.35, 1.3 to 1.4 price point. He's been really consistent as of late. I think good make cut probability. So I think a fine way to go. Let's see, as we move down further, Berger's a guy that stands out as having like really high upside, but has kind of been underwhelming at times as of late. Berger and Answer, both have tournament winning upside, the ability to challenge for a top 3 spot, be in that final pair on the weekend, but they've also missed, I think, more cuts than would be expected as of late. So I think there's kind of some high volatility, high risk, high reward components to Berger and Answer. Kokrak has been sharp. He's I think challenged, been making cuts, has challenged kind of for top 10 positions, but hasn't really been able to finish any weekends like super high. And I think given the strong field, could be difficult for him to kind of position himself for top 10 or so finish. And I just feel like there are guys with higher multipliers who have kind of the same like median outcome as far as finish position. And so that's kind of the sense for Kokrak. Webb Simpson, that's going to be a tough multiplier, I think, for him to pay off. He's very stable. He makes cuts at a really high frequency, but just as of late, like hasn't been in kind of tournament winning form like we saw with him about 12 months ago. It feels like where he was just challenging every weekend. I think was like winning a couple tournaments within a month stretch, and it just feels like with Rory playing well, with some high upside for a guy like Berger at 1.15. Hovland's been playing really well and been very consistent. It does feel like Webb at 1.1 is going to be tough to roster. Same with Brooks. I mean, he's obviously the has the narrative of being kind of the major killer, but that really hasn't been the case for him for a while. And we had a one good showing. I forget which tournament that was, but hasn't been playing like his strongest golf. But look, I mean, people are I think probably going to cling to that major killer Brooks narrative for a bit longer. Our projections wouldn't be super high on him. Schauffele is an interesting guy. Like, I feel like he is very consistent, kind of like Webb-like in that he makes a lot of cuts. He's also just like a young, kind of still kind of newish on the scene golfer, where he is making cuts at a really high rate, but just hasn't been able. I mean, even in the Masters, like, he had a good look, and just like hasn't been able to close out tournaments. And at 1.05, it's kind of a tough price point for him to, I think, be a part of a likely part of tournament winning lineups. Could see him as like a stable piece in cash games. But I don't know. My preference and our optimizer's preference typically is to try to take shots on higher multiplier guys. I think Schauffele has good make cut equity. 1.05 is tough for him to, I think, pop in for tournament purposes. So I'd be interested to see how all this shapes out for building out lineups. I'm going to go ahead and put fades on these guys: Yang, Caitlin, Rosner, Horsfield, Hogard. Let's see, Rosner, Caitlin, Atlin, Yang, Beauregard, more Horsfield. See how that shapes out, and when we run our optimal. So, and I'm probably going to throw fades on like Harrington and Hoshino. Just don't want any of these 1.65 multiplier guys who, if they have even a decent game, they're great play, or a decent weekend, they're great plays, but just the kind of likelihood of them getting there is just super low. So yeah, I mean, the builds kind of are balanced, maybe skewing towards high multiplier guys. We can see the optimal has Tringali, Hoffman, Kirk, who we talked about at the 1.4, 1.5 range. Peters is kind of a high multiplier guy that I feel comfortable taking a flyer on. And then Rory and Zalatoris, this looks like a lineup, I think, that has, like, it just seems unlikely to get 6 of 6 through, but if you can get 5 of 6 through, there's good multiplier juice on these guys. And, I think, Rory and Zalatoris feel like high confidence as far as getting through to the weekend. Of Peters, Tringali, Hoffman, Kirk. I think you're definitely happy if you get 3 of those guys too. You can live with 2 through. 4, you're obviously golden. And when we check exposures on these players, as mentioned, seeing a lot of Tringali, Kirk, Hoffman, Peters. So like for building a mix of tournament lineups, I might want to put limits on some of these higher multiplier guys. As mentioned, while this lineup has a strong medium projection on it, there is, I think, low probability of like all 6 getting through. So I think probably good to kind of mix in sprinkles of like these lower multiplier players, but not overcommit to them. So you could do something like that by like putting rules where, you have max 1 of like Hoffman, Peters, Kirk, Tringali, who we see, Werenski, Detry, Werenski, Detry, who else did we have here? Like Griot, Brandon Stone, I think is a either an amateur or I think or just a South American player who's not on tour much. So, and then adding groups, we could add like Griot in here, like Cam Davis, Palmer. Like I don't know, I feel pretty good about Palmer. I don't have too many qualms about having too much Palmer, or rather more Palmer than kind of like he's in 10% of 20 lineups. That to me doesn't feel like super high exposure. And then for those who haven't used the tool before, you can add in like different qualifiers for your runs. So I like using the bounce function. So what this will do is every time a player is rostered, it will slightly decrease their subsequent projections so that you don't get too much of players, or you don't get players that clump together, where you have like, I don't know, say you have like 60% exposure to Rory, Zalatoris, and Tringali, but you want that exposure spread out. You don't want like 60% of your lineups having all three of those guys and then 40% having none of those guys. So the balance can help achieve that. And then I like, turning differentiators to like, 2. I don't really ever go 3, but just so you get a little more diversity, especially if you're only doing like 20 lineups. So we run that through, and we can see we're getting like high exposure to Peters. So, I think Peters is a fine like high multiplier play. Looks like he's the preferred option there. And then, lots of exposure to like Zalatoris, Rory, Rahm as a kind of low multiplier, high confidence guy. Like that we're getting some Hovland, like that we're getting, some Berger and Answer. We touched on Berger Answer being like high risk, high reward. So maybe trying to avoid pairing Berger and Answer in the same lineup. Figure, we are happy with exposure to the risk of those guys, but just want not to double, I guess, that risk in this, take on the product, I guess, of that risk in any one lineup. You can kind of see how it plays out in some of the preferred plays. So, I hope that gives you a good idea kind of how you can use the optimizers. So some ways to reference the projections if you're building by hand for SuperDraft, focusing in not on players' raw projection, but on their post multiplier value. All right, let's slide now to NBA, going to our fast break projections system where you can view projections. We're going to focus on the single game contests. I think SuperDraft isn't running a ton of, I think really they're not doing any guaranteed contests for the combined 2-game multiplier slate. So looking at the single game champion mode slate, for those new to champion mode on SuperDraft, players have their utility multipliers, which is their multiplier. And then like in DraftKings where you pay, I think plus 50% for players as champions in exchange for plus 50% of their points. In SuperDraft, it's just players' multipliers are 50% more than their base utility multiplier. So like looking at Jaren Jackson, who's 0.85 or 1.85, if we multiply that times 1.5, he's got a multiplier of, when we do that times 1.5, we get 2.775. SuperDraft will round up to the second decimal place. So by championing these guys with like a trailing 0.5, you do get an extra 0.025 multiplication. So something to keep in mind as you are building lineups. And if you're kind of doing by hand and doing some mental math, definitely want to keep that in mind. Sometimes guys who are the best utility values, if kind of their multiplier number doesn't fall the right way, they can maybe not be the best champion value, and that's really only as a function of this trailing 0.05. So Jackson we like a bit. He's a hyper efficient player per minute. When he came back from injury, was playing minutes in kind of the low to mid 20s. He has been like approaching or up in the high 20s, and in his last game of the season, in which Memphis was actually like fully, not Jackson's last game. I think Memphis sat out everyone their final game, but in the last game that Jackson played, Memphis fully healthy, ran nearly 32 minutes. So expecting Memphis to keep, their rotations kind of tighter. That's just how teams typically play playoffs compared to regular season. So see a bit more opportunity for Jackson. I think 30 minutes is a fine projection for him. And he simply just got like this good multiplier on him. I do think with blocks being worth 3 points on SuperDraft, and also there being a double-double bonus, triple-double bonus, I think bigs do have kind of a elevated, just like baseline, because the SuperDraft scoring does tend to reward things they're good at, blocking shots and double-doubling, which, the most common way that's done is through points and rebounds. Jackson does those things well. He's not, I would say, not an elite rebounder, but a plus rebounder. Good defensively, both steals and blocks. He's probably projectable for, like, on average, one of each per game. I think for tournament purposes, there are routes, variants can run his way, and, he can record like up to 5 stocks, which, are 3 points apiece. So like Jackson a good bit from a median projection standpoint, and also from a mean or like tournament oriented projection. Pirtle as well, I think kind of. Oh, and one last thing about Jackson, maybe the one area where he and Pirtle differ, like Pirtle also a great rebounder, really good shot blocker, maybe not as good in steals, but Jackson also, can score from the 3-point line, which has the 0.05 bonus, which so pretty much like DraftKings, SuperDraft takes like the 3-point and double bonuses from DraftKings, but also takes the defensive bonuses from FanDuel. So like guys that do well are these, guys who can shoot the 3, guys who have double or triple equity, and guys who can defend. And I think Jackson does all of those things reasonably well. Pirtle, I think, has good double equity, defends well, but I don't think really much of a threat to score from deep. But he also figures to play, I think, more than Jackson. I think probably also a little better of a shot blocker. But really the minutes is where kind of he and Jackson differ. Interesting slate from a star standpoint. Like usually if we even look back to last night where, take Washington, Boston, for example, where there were low multiplier plays that were like truly elite. I mean, Tatum, Westbrook, Beal, even look at like Sabonis in the first game. Guys who just have few paths to like utter failure. I mean, obviously they can underperform a little bit and make, their rostering them a little painful. But, even like last night, I think that the jump shot winning lineup had Westbrook, who had like a good but not great game. But he still just like does so much that there are a few paths to him letting down massively. Don't really think that's the case tonight. I mean, DeRozan as the most expensive player at 1x. Look, I mean, DeRozan does a lot of things reasonably well, but isn't exceptional at any one thing. Maybe you could say he's a very good scorer, but like he doesn't shoot many threes. He is, decent for steals purposes, but not like an elite defender. He can distribute the ball. I think he's got like maybe 7 assists per game or something like that. But I don't think he has like great double equity. So I think just like if DeRozan has a bad shooting night, he's not doing enough elsewhere where like he is a bulletproof play. And same could be said for like Ja Morant. And then J-Val is. We haven't projected as one of the stronger plays on this slate, but like also far from failure proof. The one thing I like about J-Val is he gets most of his production through rebounding, which I think to be kind of low, maybe the lowest variance as far as like statistic productivity goes. Take like obviously steals, blocks are very high variance. Player only has a dozen or so attempts to block a shot on any one given game. Player, I guess, has far more opportunities to take steals, but players rarely. Players don't frequently take like gambles that try to generate steals. Shots, even kind of the highest usage players are taking no more than like 30 shots a game, and few players take even more than 20 shots a game. Rebounds, on the other hand, I mean, you as a rebounder, you're getting exposure to, I don't know, figure there's like 100, 170, 180 shots per game. rarely does more than half of those shots go in. Player like J-Val, who's going to play, we're projecting him for 35 minutes. So, that's 75% of the game. There's just like far more rebound opportunities in a guy like Valanciunas, who's got a really high rebound rate. I think it's just a low variance play. He also is involved enough usage rate of about 20%, or we're projecting a 20% usage rate. He's going to be involved enough in the offense where I think there's good double-double equity for J-Val. You sprinkle in a couple blocks for him. I think he is a very viable play to consider at utility and potentially also the captain, although the nature of the slate I think is going to recommend taking more gambles on some of these higher multiplier guys, not locking into Jaren Jackson or Pirtle or Brooks or Keldon Johnson or Walker or whatever, not locking into them at champion, but just kind of taking a smattering of some of these guys. Between J-Val, Morant, and DeRozan, they just don't feel like strong enough like floor multiplier plays that you feel highly confident that they will beat out in value all low multipliers. So I think a decent approach for this game could just be, especially if you're submitting 5 to 10 lineups, is just take shots on some of these higher multiplier guys. You could kind of, to keep a tight player pool, take shots on like Pirtle, Jackson, Dylan Brooks, Johnson. You can even take Walker. I think Walker's got good upside at 1.25 is a little bit of a tough multiplier, but could see him take over games. Lonnie Walker, good defensive upside, and I don't know, for the sake of keeping a tight player pool, like maybe you would just consider these four guys in kind of the high multiplier range. Sprinkle them in. You could do, if you're doing like 5 lineups, you could do like 2 Jackson champs, a Pirtle, Brooks, at Keldon, or you could remove Keldon and just go like 2 Jackson, 2 Pirtle, 2 Brooks, or move it around however you want. But that would seem to be like a decent path, given that these low multiplier guys just, and Morant's got a high ceiling, I suppose, but I don't know. I think my preference would be, and our optimizer would suggest that taking gambles on some of these higher multiplier guys at champion is probably the route to go. And then if you wanted to, like, I don't know, throw in some balance to get some diversity. And one thing I think that is pretty common in these showdown contests is to see like a train of players locking on like an optimal or some near optimal lineup. So for the sake of avoiding duplication, you could set a rule to like have no more than pretty much avoid taking like the optimal or kind of the top 2 or 3 optimal lineups. So like maybe I will go something like Jackson, Pirtle, Brooks, Keldon, Murray, Walker, and Gay. Say, give me a lineup that has at least one player other than these guys. So that is, yes, that would be 4 players running the optimal. So you get, you're kind of forcing yourself to take some slightly, less popular, but guys who still have some pop. So like we're fitting in Jonas here, more Jonas. Now taking on like Drew Eubanks, who like on a main slate, these are guys that wouldn't be in consideration. But I mean, we've seen guys like Alex Lynn or Ish Smith be a part of tournament winning lineups in these showdown contests. So definitely don't be afraid to take shots on some of these guys who might only play like 20 minutes or so. If they're hyper productive and some of the other players, some of the starters flounder, or they're multiple, the kind of delta in their multipliers just makes those starters less valuable. Can be wise to take a shot on like one of these kind of thinner plays. So could be one way to play that one. Going to reset and go now to Golden State, Los Angeles. Definitely the high-profile game of the night. Also going to have to wait a little longer for it. And I think, one way in which these two games differ is that, you should feel pretty good about Curry, James, Davis. I think all three of these guys have the ability to blow up and pay off their price point relative to the multiplier of some of these other players in ways that DeRozan or Morant or J-Val can't quite do. That being said, we still have, I think, more preference for some of these high multiplier guys. I mean, Bazemore has been playing a ton of minutes. Oubre is out again tonight. Damian Lee is out. These are guys that play kind of the swingman, shooting guard, small forward position. Oubre even plays some power forward type role. These guys fill the role that, or previously filled the role that Bazemore fills as well. So by virtue of them being out, I think Bazemore is in line for good minutes, low 30s, high 20s, something like that. His usage isn't great. He's not the high usage player like Jaren Jackson is, but he's also got a good multiplier on him. I mean, 2.65 has to be near the top. Yeah. And if you look at other guys at this same multiplier point, KCP stands out as a possible play, but lower multiplier, lower usage. Looney, Poole, Poole's a high usage guy, but only projecting for 20 minutes. I think he's worth a sprinkle. Looney playing fewer minutes, lower usage, but can be productive as a rebounder. He's a guy that can kind of be small balled out of lineups. So yeah, I mean, I think Bazemore is a strong play. Figures to be on the floor. He isn't a zero usage player. He's not Juan Toscano Anderson level or Draymond Green. I guess doesn't take a lot of shots, but he is hyper productive as a distributor and rebounder and defender. Bazemore I think brings some value as a defender. He is good steals guy, non-zero shot blocker. So I think Bazemore is in consideration for both captain and utility slots. Andrew Wiggins is kind of in this tier of outside of the elites, priced lower than or with a multiplier higher than Davis, LeBron, Curry, but I still think is a guy who's going to play a lot. 37 minutes is the highest minute projection we have. It looks like Golden State, expected to run a little tighter of a rotation, get a little more minutes for their starters. And yeah, Wiggins, I mean, he can be high usage. He can take over the game at times. Not quite as prolific as a 3-point scorer as Curry. I think more of a inside the arc kind of approach, but can block shots, can play defense. Not a huge distributor, but not a total zero as an assist guy. Not a total zero as a rebounder. And we've seen games where Wiggins can fill it up. So I think 1.7 is a good multiplier for him. Looney, Anderson, these are guys, going back to golf where there's, some of these high multiplier guys who I think are high upside by virtue of their multiplier, but, pose fairly high risk. I think setting rules that cap exposure to guys, some of these guys Toscano Anderson, Looney. I mean, you could even throw Bazemore, I think, in that category. Schroeder's a guy I feel more confident about. I think he's just a higher usage player. You could throw KCP into this bucket. Setting rules that say I want max of one of Bazemore, Looney. Bazemore, I feel fine with just our highest projections. We can go Looney, Toscano Anderson and Looney are really the two ones that stand out. We can throw KCP in there as well. The kind of that trio, and especially I guess maybe just because Toscano Anderson and Looney played somewhat similar positions and roles where like you're just hoping they fall into some field goal attempts and are productive on the boards. Maybe set rule capping them. And then like I look at Davis and James being low multiplier, being on the same team. They just have to account for so much of the fantasy production. Like I just don't even know if it's possible for, like if Davis has a big game, massive game, puts up 30 plus points, it probably means that LeBron has a slightly underwhelming game. And if LeBron has a massive game, it probably means that Davis has a slightly underwhelming game. And then if they both have kind of average games, really the only way they both fit into the optimal lineup is if, I guess, like the game is just low scoring. And of course there are paths to them both having like above average games, getting like the fire icon on like the DraftKings app. But in general, we even on main slate shows, we've kind of talked about trying to avoid rostering too many guys on the same team that are low multiplier and thus need like super high volume production to be optimal, to be in the optimal. So maybe setting a rule like that on one of those guys. Then we have our bounce and differentiators left over. Interested to give this a run just to see how it goes. So we can see we got a lot of Bazemore, got a lot of Wiggins. Got some like Looney and Toscano Anderson. And these are guys that like I am a little concerned about their true upside. So maybe fading Juan Toscano Anderson and Looney in the captain, fine to play them in utility, but don't want to allocate kind of the most valuable spot to those guys. And we can see how it shakes out, and we can go to the exposure tab just to see how it goes. So looking at captain, got a lot of Bazemore and Wiggins. Bazemore is like even a guy I think you could, he's got great value, but I think you could consider putting like a champion fade on Bazemore. But we'll keep him in there. So yeah, I got Bazemore, Wiggins, Schroeder. We like some at captain, LeBron. I think this exposure level, you are not locking into any one player, keeping though a fairly tight pool. 12 players. Looks like a little more Golden State heavy. Let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7 versus 5, and obviously the Golden State guys are kind of towards the top, so looks like more Golden State heavy builds. I think this kind of gives a good overview of how you could possibly think about building multiple lineups or just using the projections for the NBA. Hope all that makes sense. And now to round it out, we'll go to MLB for today and just talk through how to use the tool, looking at projections. We'll see kind of who are some of the top or preferred plays at each position. Really the only two positions being hitter and pitcher. And we'll round it out. So setting the SuperDraft, playing the classic format. You can look at top projections, either as all or batters or pitchers. For the purpose of the show, we'll go position by position. So looking at top batters, Seattle got shut down last night. Could see people hesitant to roster any Mariners. They're high volatility. I mean, the thing with the Mariners is like when they put the bat on the ball, especially like guys like Lewis, Kalinick. Kalinick, we have a small sample, but like Haniger, really these three guys in particular have been making good contact with the baseball. The problem with Seattle is that they make pretty infrequent contact. So it kind of can tend towards high volatility outcomes. They have been a team that our projections have been eager to roster pitchers against, but also a team that our projections have been eager to stack, which I think is an interesting notion, but I hope kind of that understanding the nature of some of their hitters makes sense. They're top heavy in that they have 3 or 4 guys Ty France, who's not in the order tonight, but like Dylan Moore, another guy. These are guys. Ty France, I think, makes frequent contact, but outside of France, like a lot of guys who make infrequent contact, but can really mash the ball when they make contact. So it's going to lead itself to some nights last night where they get. It's going to lead itself to nights like last night where they get no hit, but we would think would also lead to a number of strong performances. I think they have Skirball tonight, so I think a fine matchup. I forget what his first name is. Tarek Skirball tonight, lefty for Detroit, young pitcher. So I think a good spot for like Lewis. We'll see if Kalinick plays. I'm not sure that lineup has been confirmed yet. Maybe they keep him out just given he's young. Lefty, try to avoid the lefty-lefty matchup. We'll see. We'll update that as log approaches. But yeah, Seattle would be a lineup. I think that you could stack reasonably. Skirball is not going to be a pitcher, I would guess, that we want to roster. So you're not like sometimes Seattle can find itself in a position where it's an offense you want to stack, but then there's kind of like some interest in stacking or rostering the pitcher. So there's kind of like a difficult decision that needs to be made, or that the optimizer will have to make. Doesn't appear to be the case tonight. So like Seattle looks like a lineup we can stack. As I look here just at some of the teams that are frequenting the top, like nice little 1-2, Mullins and Hayes. Hayes has been a great cash play and tournament play really as of late. So yeah, like as kind of a mini stack, you could go Baltimore 1-2. Imagine the optimizer will find ways to, well, man, you really have to scroll down to find another Baltimore hitter. So maybe we won't Severino batting fourth. So maybe we won't see that many optimizer spit out that many Baltimore stacks. Carlson's been a strong cash play, and Edmund has been a guy we've been high on for a while, so could see some St. Louis stacks. 1-2-5 is a bit wide, but I don't know. You could kind of. We'll talk about how to kind of program the optimizer to set in like stacking constraints, so you can make some decisions that allow you to stack 1-2-5, Edmund, Carlson, Carpenter, or ways that you could program the optimizer that would naturally prevent you from achieving that stack. And with that example, we can kind of talk about the pros and cons of each approach. As we scroll down more, Yelich is back. Lorenzo Cain has been part of our cash builds as of late. Colton Wong. So like that looks like a really nice 1-2-3 if this lineup comes through as it's currently projected. That would be a stack that we'd be getting decent exposure to, even some Omar Narvaez, even though we don't have a super strong projection on him. See Simeon down here, and I know we had Bichette towards the top, but Bichette's looking more like a one-off play, as there's not a whole lot of optimism around some of the bats around him. But I think has been a strong cash play, strong tournament play, very popular. It's had high ownership, really night over night. So I don't know. Those are some of the teams. Texas stands out. Garcia, Solak, Nate Lowe, I think is probably got to be up here somewhere. Nate Lowe. So none of these guys project as like elite values, but I think, all three of these guys I think have had really high upside. And I think it's just been Texas has been a strong stack that we've been playing a good bit of this year, and expect them to be part of the mix tonight. Pitcher, Corbin Burns has been rock solid. I imagine he will be very popular, as has been the case with him pretty much every start this year, at least every start after his first couple of starts. I think Burns and Peralta, people kind of quickly have gotten the memo on. I think just a really fine play, fine going, lots of Burns, cash game, borderline lock. You can make some considerations for some of these higher multiplier guys, or means even real solid. Kershaw and Flaherty, kind of two of the lower multiplier pitchers, although I guess like not really. Shohei has the the 1.1. Well, I'm gonna have to go back and look at the CSVs and make sure that looks like that is it looks like that's a batting projection for Shohei. So I'll have to manually edit the CSVs there because I think SuperDraft has had him as a DH only, never as a starting pitcher. So nixing Shohei, Scherzer. So I guess, Flaherty is quite nearly at the bottom of the multiplier pool, but we've got a high projection on Flaherty. Scherzer, we've been low on pretty regularly this year, and so far it has paid off. I think probably will continue, as the projections suggest, to stay away from Scherzer. Trevor Rogers, rather, a guy who's pitched well this year. Our projections don't seem to be super high on him, but I guess he is like in the mix. So if you're building, like if you're entering in that quarter contest, so 70 entries, you have decent bounce on you. You might get some Trevor Rogers. So yeah, I hope that gives kind of a lay of the land of the pitchers. Looking like Burns, Gilbert, you might have to make kind of a subjective call on him. He's only got one start under his belt, so pretty small sample. I think probably might prefer to make like a subjective pivot to a guy like Means or Eflin, or even Kershaw. But Eflin's been solid. Means obviously has the no-hitter under his belt. So I think as I just look at it, kind of the cash game preferences would be going Burns and then one of Means or Eflin. We'll see how Vegas lines move. We'll see how lineups come in. The projections are conditional on the batters that are batting. I think we talked about maybe on a previous show, like San Diego is a very different lineup when Tatis is not playing versus when he is. So projecting on specific, the specifics of the projected lineup, I think is super valuable. You can also use the lineup stacks tab to just get a sense of like what lineups are bubbling towards the top. So like we touched on Seattle, Milwaukee, we touched on them. Texas not showing up super high. I think what this is aggregating all 9 hitters. So naturally hitter teams that are top heavy. So like Texas, we're very high on those 3 hitters, Solak, Lowe, and Garcia. If the rest of the lineup is fairly weak, those teams will show up like not super high value in this tab. So that's why I kind of like just looking at the projections, sorting on value and just seeing like what teams are popping up at the top. So yeah, let's talk about how we can configure our optimal or optimizer runs to kind of get rules that we want with regards to avoiding negative correlation, achieving stacking principles that we might want. I am always throwing prevent pitchers versus opposing batters. There's just so much negative correlation in that circumstance that I think it's fine for cash game builds to have batters going up against pitchers, but don't want to be doing that for tournament purposes. Obviously, batters can homer off the bullpen, but like if a pitcher has a really good game, which you need to win a tournament, the bullpen won't be pitching for very long. And you just need like a very specific outcome to occur. You need the pitcher to like throw deep into the game, and then in like the few innings that it's in the bullpen's hands, that specific batter that you rostered homering off the bullpen, I think, kind of a long scenario to try to chase. And then throwing a little bit of bounce on there. I typically like going a little higher bounce for pitchers than batters. There are so many batters that like even a small bounce coefficient will, push batters and kind of promote batter diversity at a pretty decent clip. There are a few pitchers that, sometimes you need higher bounce coefficients to get the diversity that you want. That being said, a big slate like this, and, a number of pitchers like really Burns through, Morton almost, it's all pretty tight. So like, I don't know that you need a huge bounce. I think there's some nights where I'll go up to like 20 or 25. We'll just keep it at 15 for the time being. And then the lineup stacking tab. I want to try to cycle through all teams and try to build the best. We'll go like the best 3-team stack, cycling through all teams. And then I talked about with St. Louis, the idea of going like Edman plus Carlson plus Carpenter, 1, 2, and 5, skipping over 3 and 4. So I guess it'll actually play out fine. But like I like using max batting gaps of 2. The idea being that if you have players that are too far apart, like if you went 1, 2, and 6, especially if it's a popular stack, you like for a 1, 2, 6 stack to pop off, it just seems very likely that guys in between the hitters are also going to succeed. One of the 3, 4, or 5 hitters, or you can get kind of a wraparound with that where 6 leads off with a double and then the leadoff hitter drives him in. You just need very unique circumstances for like 1, 2, and 6 to have great games but all the players in between to kind of underwhelm. Of course, all these guys can individually hit home runs. So that, just understanding the trade-off between being restrictive, and you can dial it down to 1 where, you have like, if you're going Edman Carlson, you only are able to stack those guys with the 8 hitter for a wraparound because there's, the 9 hitter gap, or the 3 or 4 where you have, 0 gaps or 1 gap by going 1, 2, 4. So obviously you're keeping it tighter, kind of avoiding some of the circumstances that we described with like having too wide of a stack. But you're also opening yourself up to like not getting kind of the most value. So I think of 2, like a 2 batter gap with stacks of 3, or like a 1 batter gap with stacks of 2. I think of that as kind of like a happy medium. We can try to run this through for just 5 lineups because it sometimes can take time, cycling through all the teams. So yeah, as mentioned, we're getting a lot of Burns, we're getting a lot of Gilbert. Looks like we're getting a lot of Yankees. Well, sorry, not Yankee stacks. We're just getting kind of Judge one-offs. Well, I mean, everyone is actually 20%. So like, looks like we have some Yankee stacks here with Judge, Frazier, LeMahieu. That's, I think that's probably going to be like 1, 2. Not sure where Frazier's batting. He might be 5th. Looks like we've got Bichette 1 off with no other Blue Jays. So like Bichette, I think we like as a fine 1-off play. Have Mullins and Hayes, and who would be the other Oriole that we took here? Orioles are not a team I'm super familiar with, so not sure who the extra Oriole we took is. Is Margot with the Orioles? I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. Of course, Seattle saw some Kyle Lewis and Dylan Moore, so that's looking like kind of the preferred Seattle stack. So you get kind of a sense of the mixes there and who are some of the players win stacking that we are getting in our lineups. If we like update it to 20, might take a little longer to run. Potentially not good use of time for the sake of the show. Maybe he was Mancini in there and I just skipped over his name. I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, hope that gives you a sense of how the how you can leverage the optimizer for building lineups that you stack up, how you can create rules to prevent pitchers and hitters from going up against one another. I think it's a really powerful tool, especially if you're MMEing, which SuperDraft has, I think, a number, like maybe 4 or 5 different multi-entry tournaments available tonight. And there's kind of a full slate. So I think a lot of players to consider, a lot of ins and outs, and I just think doing stuff at doing things at scale, building lineups at scale is really how we want to be doing things if we are doing MME. You can obviously build 20 lineups by hand, but I think it's just difficult to do in a reasonable amount of time. And so I think this tool is like really just a good way to build lineups quickly. Obviously, you saw there is kind of some runtime needed when you scale up the number of lineups or creating more restrictive stacking rules, but in general, runs pretty smoothly. You just want to make sure you're leaving 10 minutes or so before lock and not trying to run like 70 lineups 3 minutes before lock. You run into, with super restrictive rules, you run into the risk of just not getting it done in time. So encourage you guys tonight to check out, like I said, we've gone over NBA, MLB, PGA Championship tomorrow, major tournament, really, some great names in play. SuperDraft has contests for all, so I encourage you guys to check that out. Encourage you guys to check out the ASA tools if you're a subscriber. If you're not, you can access for free our free SuperDraft projections for PGA. We don't have that available for DraftKings, we don't have that available for the other sports. Our PGA projections are behind a paywall for DraftKings and FanDuel. But if you're playing SuperDraft, which we've talked about on the show, accessing the free PGA projections in the PGA dropdown, free SuperDraft projections could be a way to go. We will have that up through tomorrow morning. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Good luck, everyone, tonight, this weekend, tomorrow, Friday. We will be back either Thursday or Friday with another show.